My paper will be somewhat general. That was the title, some considerations wanted to say, and is not devoted to a particular point or topic. Most of you know that I've been interested in the history, culture, and documents of Syriac Christians of Kerala for about 22 years. The particular figure of this Christianity and its history has always struck me, and it is on this point that I intend to speak today, more to raise a question than as a definite presentation. East Syriac Christianity in India, before the arrival of Portuguese, has a chronology that corresponds more or less to its history in Central and Eastern Asia, with a missionary movement which begins very soon and comes to an end, through a different end, at the turn of the Middle Ages to modern period. A comparison can also be drawn with Christianity in the Persian Gulf, at least for the ancient period, because it disappears much earlier, even if the date is a question very much debated now, whether we rely to the last written testimony in the 7th century or on the new theory of some archaeologists saying that it goes to the 9th century. But anyway, it's finished much before. But Persian Gulf is also a point of comparison that could be very useful. And when we compare these regions to India, it's very striking how much it is different. On the one hand, we have a variety of documentation, as well archaeological and written, not very abundant, but real. On the other, almost nothing is to be seen. Yet, it is in Kerala that Syriac Christianity survives, and pretty well. We are here to see it, when it has long disappeared in the other regions of the East Syriac mission. This contrast is the problem I would like to address today. I will insist on the scarcity of documentation. It doesn't mean that there was nothing, that there was no Christian here. I do not say that. Absence of testimony is not testimony of absence, but it is nevertheless striking. Well, just a rapid frame, but on things all of you know. As a firm confirmation of the presence of Christians in South India, as you all know, the first testimony is to be found in the Christian topography of Cosmas Indicopestes in the first third of the 6th century. Here also, I don't mean that there was nothing before, but it's the first historical testimony. All that is relating to St. Thomas is tradition and not proper history. A question is also in the documentation, what is to be meant in a Syriac text relating to India? It can mean as well, every place that was to be joined through the Persian Gulf. So it could be India, could be Ethiopia, could be Oman. So when we have a mention of India, it's not always very clear. And it is for example, the problem with the mission of Theophile, the so-called Theophilus of India, as known through Philostorgus. Another mention is to be found in the letters of the Catholicos Ishoiab to Simeon of Revardashir. At a time of crisis between the center of the church in Seleucia, Ctesiphon, and the metropolite of Fars, and it was very much related to the Islamic Arabic conquest, which separated the center of the church, which was still Persian Empire. So the Christian communities of India were dependent of Fars. And the Patriarch expresses his concern for Christians not only in India, but at the remote extremity of the empire of Persians, up to a place called Kala, at a distance of 1,200 parasangs. So here, clearly, what is India is most probably not India, but Oman, but this far region called Kala could be India. It seems that it is a moment where the Church of India got its own metropolitan, most probably a tribute to a difficulty of communications, not only with the center of the church, but also with Persia. And later, we have the testimony of Marco Polo coming back from China by the sea road, who mentions Christians in India, in Ceylon, and in Socotra. And of course, the testimony of the Portuguese arriving to Kochi as soon as 1492 and discovering there were Christians here. So we have a sparse, and we could add some other mentions, but what I said is that we have a sparse but continuous trend of testimonies on the presence of Christians during late antiquity and the Middle Ages. And so it was to say, I don't say there were no Christians. There were, and we have testimonies. But what strikes is how local remains are poor. So I wanted to make a sort of comparison with these other places of expansion of the Church of the East. My comparison will be first on documentation and then on institution and organization. Documentation first, monuments. Remains, archaeological remains, were discovered in Central Asia. For example, just to give a few indications, 2 churches are known on the site of Merv, who was to become a metropolitan see. It's in Turkmenistan. One church had been excavated in Urgut, about 50 kilometers from Samarkand. In China, the so-called White Pagoda is supposed to be a reutilization of an ancient church. You excuse my bad English, and I am still a bit tired. With respect to its orientation of this pagoda. In the Gulf region, it's much richer. Several churches have been excavated, which are often part of monasteries. It is still in discussion about the Failaka, this island near Kuwait. You have a clear church, and the form is really what it is, what we could expect from a Syriac church. And there are all sort of buildings around. It's not sure, but most probably it's a monastery. Others have been found in Gulf, so for example, Sirbaniyas and others. So we have several material testimony of architecture. As far as I know, no church was ever excavated in Kerala, which predates the 16th century, nor any monastery. I do not mean that there were no church, and we have to account as well with the continuous rebuilding of monuments on the same spot, and with the fact that no archaeology has ever been done in this context. But it's in a way striking, and it could be an appeal for some archaeology to be done, Christian archaeology to be done in Kerala. Inscriptions and reliefs. Inscriptions are quite numerous in Central Asia. The biggest lot is formed by the funerary inscriptions in Semirije, in Tajikistan, where hundreds of inscribed tombstones have been discovered dating to the 13th and 14th century. Of course, we all know the exceptional stele from Xi'an, written in Syriac and Chinese, but it's not the only monument. A memorial inscription on a pillar has been found in Luoyang, which is also from the ancient period of the history of the church in China. Funerary inscriptions were found in Inner Mongolia and as far as the coastal region south of Shanghai. In Kerala, we only know the crosses, of which there are several stemming from the same model, and of which one, a good representative is the stele in the Valiapalli of Kottayam. The model is certainly ancient, coming from the time when Middle Persian was one of the languages of the church, as it is inscribed in Persian. But we do not know which one is the original. There are several exemplaries in Kerala and even one in Mount Thomas near Chennai. And we don't know the date of the copies. On the Kottayam one, whose date is not known, there are traditions, but nothing sure, the Syriac inscription was engraved most probably not earlier than the 16th century. So, of this group of inscriptions, what we know is that a stele, one stele, which has a typical East Syrian cross and a Middle Persian inscriptions, which was engraved at a moment probably not so far from the time of Ishoyab, which I mentioned, somewhere in South India, and that copies were made whose date we have no indication. As for the inscriptions in Syriac, we do not have any sure one before the arrival of the Portuguese missionaries. The only case, and if you have questions, Alain will and Jacob can help me, is the inscription of the step beneath the altar of Palai. So it's complicated because we see a very little part of the inscriptions because there is this altar and it's quite difficult to ask to demolish the beautiful altar. But nothing makes it sure that it's more ancient than the 16th century. The most interesting inscription to mention are the famous copper plates written in local language, which give indications to the status of Christians. But here, I confess, it's question I don't know personally. I have no image of them, and would like to know whether there is some scientific publication of them and a proper scientific study of the text. So far for inscriptions, manuscripts. Ancient manuscripts have been preserved, quite numerous, in Central Asia, in no little number, in the oasis of Turfan, in Bulaik, in Dunhuang, in Karakoto. A beautiful manuscript copied later at the Mongol period shows the appropriation of Syriac culture by elites, with king and queen represented as Constantine and Helena. These manuscripts are biblical, liturgical, but also literature to be read by monks for their intellectual life. There are traces of quite an important activity of copy of manuscripts in different languages, and particularly in Syriac. I will come back to it later. For Kerala's manuscripts, no one predating the arrival of Portuguese and copied in Kerala is preserved here in Kerala. The so-called Auto da Fe of Dayamper has often been supposed to have destroyed a rich literature. But there are hints it is not the case. Just one ancient manuscript, when I say ancient, it's pre-Portuguese, is preserved in the Vatican Library. It's Vatican Syriac 22, and it's a biblical book, a lectionary of the epistles of Paul, copied in the royal town of Thengala, in the church of Mar Koryakos, and I quote, in the time of Maria Balara V, Turk, Catholic of the Orient, in the year 1612, that is in the Christian era, in 1300 or 1301. It's the only one. One could suppose that the manuscripts taken to Vatican would have been representative of what could be found in Kerala. And it means that it was mainly liturgical manuscripts, and this one was intended for reading in the church. So it means perhaps that there were mainly manuscripts copied for liturgy, preserved and copied in church, and only copied when they were decaying and had to be replaced. It means no ancient collection of manuscripts. Indian manuscripts copied in the 16th century, so after the arrival of Portuguese and before Dayamper, and preserved in Vatican, are also all liturgical. The Acts of the Synod of Dayamper, which mention almost all the so-called Nestorian literature. You have to destroy, if you find this, you have to destroy, and there is the whole Syro-Oriental literature. This list seems to be theoretical. It lists all texts that were to be destroyed, if found, but there is no proof that they were really present in Kerala. The only text mentioned in the Acts of Dayamper as really present, and so it's well diffused, you will find them, is a book of medicine. In the Acts, he said Parisman or Persian Book of Medicine. So a practical one that was mainly useful for laiccs. As for the extension of East Syriac Church in Kerala, what is especially typical of the Syriac culture of the Church of the East were some institutions, such as monasteries. Monasteries were the core of Syriac culture, East and West, and the core where this culture was enlarged and preserved. There were monasteries in the Gulf, as I said, and there were monasteries in Central Asia and China. Just one example, Rabban Soma and Marcos, who came from China to the Near East in the Mongol period, and Marcos was to become the Patriarch Mariavahala, were monks before leaving from Khambalik, Beijing. We have no mention of monasteries on the Malabar coast when Portuguese arrived. Second institution, very typical, system of schools. This system was of particular importance for the Church of the East, with a whole system organized from sort of primary schools in villages to learn to read and write Syriac and Psalter, to more important secondary schools in towns, and sort of universities, such as that of Nisibis, Gondishapur, especially for medicine, and of course, Seleucia Ctesiphon, and afterwards Baghdad. Ishodana of Basra is a good testimony to these curses that was lived by the dignitaries and founders of the Church of the East. And here also, we have no real testimony of such schools in Malabar. What is said about Angamali is all founded on a documentation whose earliest part is from the 16th century. Of course, there were priests, and they had to be educated to reading Syriac, knowing liturgy, but it could very well have been done by priests themselves to a young man who was chosen to succeed him. In a personal relation from master to student, sort of Malpan relation. This was also the case in Occident in the Middle Ages. Well, we have no indication. So it's just raising questions and saying, we have no indication. The school, I can say there were no school, but I can say it could function and be without organized school with a lot of students. Question of literature and authors. Authors of Bet Katraye have played a very important role in the elaboration of Syriac culture and literature. Without mentioning all of them, we all know the importance of Isaac of Nineveh, who was from Bet Katraye. And the whole conference and book has been recently dedicated to the writers of Bet Katraye. Nothing such is known from Kerala. And last point, what is important in this mission, Syriac mission outside the core of the church, is the creation of a mixed culture. And here also we have a lot of indications of a culture mixing Sogdian, Turkish, and so on, to Syriac culture. I come to the very interesting papers yesterday of Hidemi Takahashi and Shinichi Muto, who showed some traces, but there are others, of a mixture of cultures between Syriac, Persian, Sogdian, Turkish, and Chinese. Christian of Sogdian, Turkish, Chinese origin of these languages learned Syriac and created sort of new culture, ecclesiastical and religious culture between it. No such Syro-Malayalam or Syro-Indian culture is known from ancient times. Yet, writing local language was known and practiced. The copper plaques testimony with it. And it concerns Christians, as these plaques mention Christians. As I said, absence of testimony is not testimony of absence, but everything is linked. Culture, its elaboration and transmission, as well by teaching than by copying manuscripts, was made in monasteries. So the absence of everything raises questions. So now, as not a conclusion, but grouping all these ideas and saying there is something to look at. Indian Christianity before the Portuguese is a very original one. No traces of monasteries, no ecclesiastical culture, as well preserved, just what is needed for liturgical life. And it seems that there were, in fact, few destructions in the empire. I do not mean to say that there were no Christians, nor that there were only ignorant men. The few information coming from the documentation, the so-called copper plates, show a sort of social elite, well integrated in the society of the land. What seems to be absent is an ecclesiastical Syriac culture, preserved and elaborated by monks in monasteries, which is typical of Syriac culture. Syriac culture was never the culture of a political power, but developed in ecclesiastical institutions, and especially in monasteries. It means that without monasteries, there would have no Syriac really culture. What was needed for liturgy, but no more. But there were Christians, and there were even a political elite. And we have to be careful about what we know from later documentation. In an article in the ARP, I don't remember the year, Etienne Cochran showed how Archbishop Francis Rose may have insisted on the antiquity of Angamali institutions and saying there was schools, there was to give value to his own position as a bishop of Angamali. So, no such monastery culture, not so much ecclesiastical culture. A way that could be studied is how laïcs would have played a especially important role in the Christian society of Malabar and would have been the bearers of what was the culture of this society, which perhaps was not so Syriac. And of this, I just mentioned a reflection of Alain Desrumaux yesterday. We were speaking about that. The importance of the archdeacon in Kerala could be a sort of perhaps preservation of this quite special situation of the Church of India regarding to laity. It means that the development of Syriac culture as a written and intellectual culture perhaps developed more in confrontation with people coming from the Occident, a sort of clericalization in reaction to the arrival of missionaries. Inscription as that on the jamb door of Mulan Thuruthi, the inscription of the bell, to mention two old inscriptions of the 16th century, of the beginning of the Portuguese period, and very beautiful inscriptions, are testimony of Latin influence on the development of what is now a rich tradition of engraving Syriac inscriptions. Both of them have expressions such as Kadisho Toma or Kadishat Mariam instead of Mar Toma and Maria Mariam that are Latin. I'm finishing. And there are others. Copy of manuscript and development of a Syriac Malayalam culture with its own form of writing and with its own form of Garshuni is perhaps also a reaction to the arrival of Latin, but also the arrival of the Syro-Occidental tradition and its secondary development of the arrival of Portuguese, and the emulation between the two traditions would have been a great stimulus to the development of a local Syriac culture. Well, that's the point. Work is in progress, and we lack information. It was just a few reflections which were not intended to be shocking, but to stimulate reflection.
Thank you.